The morning mist hung heavy over Windsor Castle as Prince William stood at the tall windows of his private study. His fingers traced the cold glass while he watched the gardens below come alive with early sunlight. Today would be different from all the others. Today would mark the beginning of something he had never imagined possible. Kate entered the room quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea on a silver tray. She had been doing this every morning for the past 15 years of their marriage. The simple ritual had become their sacred time together before the world demanded their attention. But this morning, her hands trembled slightly as she set down his cup. "The children are still sleeping," she whispered, settling into the chair beside his desk. Her voice carried the weight of sleepless nights and difficult conversations they had been having for weeks. William turned from the window and looked at his wife. Even in the soft morning light, he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. The past month had tested them in ways they never expected. The news had arrived like a thunderbolt during what should have been a peaceful summer at Balmoral. The doctors had been direct but gentle when they delivered their findings. Kate's condition was serious, requiring immediate and extensive treatment abroad. The best specialists were in Switzerland, and she would need to stay there for at least 6 months, possibly longer. The treatment was experimental, offering hope but no guarantees. "We should talk to George, Charlotte, and Louis today," Kate said, wrapping her fingers around the warm teacup. "They know something is happening. George keeps asking why I've been visiting so many doctors." William nodded, his throat tight with emotion. Their eldest son, now 21, had always been perceptive. At Cambridge University, studying history like his father once did, George had noticed the changes in his mother during his recent visit home. Charlotte, 19 and passionate about environmental science, had been asking pointed questions about Kate's health. Even 17-year-old Louis, usually lost in his music and art, had grown quieter lately. The palace staff had been sworn to secrecy, but keeping such news contained was like trying to hold back the tide. William knew they had perhaps days before the story would break in the press. The thought of photographers camping outside the Swiss clinic made his chest tighten with protective anger. "I've spoken with Father," William said, using their private name for King Charles. "He understands completely. He went through this with Mother's treatments years ago, though hers were less intensive." Kate smiled sadly. The comparison to Queen Camilla's successful cancer treatment 5 years earlier offered some comfort, but every situation was unique. The Queen had recovered fully and returned to royal duties stronger than before, but her treatment had been in London, allowing Charles to visit daily and maintain some normalcy for the family. "What did he say about the constitutional questions?" Kate asked. As the Princess of Wales and future Queen Consort, her extended absence would create unprecedented challenges for the monarchy. "He said the crown has weathered worse storms," William replied. "The most important thing is your health. Everything else is just logistics." But they both knew it was more complicated than that. Kate had become beloved by the British people in a way that reminded many of Diana's early years. Her charity work, her natural way with children, and her ability to connect with people from all walks of life had made her an essential part of the modern monarchy's appeal. The breakfast table felt unusually quiet when the family gathered an hour later. George had driven down from Cambridge the night before, sensing something important was happening. Charlotte had postponed a field trip with her environmental studies program. Louis had canceled band practice. "There's something your mother and I need to tell you all," William began, his voice steady despite the storm in his chest. The 3 young adults exchanged glances. They had inherited their mother's intuition and their father's analytical minds. They knew this moment had been building for weeks. Kate reached across the table and took George's hand, then Charlotte's. Louis moved his chair closer so she could include him in her gentle grip. "I'm going to be going away for treatment," she said simply. "There's nothing to be frightened about." but I need to be in Switzerland for several months to get the best possible care." "What kind of treatment?" Charlotte asked directly. She had always been the one to ask the questions others were afraid to voice. "It's for something the doctors found during my routine checkups," Kate explained. "It's serious enough that we're taking every precaution, but the prognosis is very good." George straightened in his chair, every inch the future king he would someday become. "What can we do? How can we help?" "By being yourselves," William answered. "By continuing your studies and your lives. By understanding that sometimes families have to be apart for a while so they can be together for much longer." Louis, usually the family's emotional compass, had been quiet throughout the conversation. Finally, he spoke. "Will you be alone there?" Kate's eyes filled with tears she had been holding back for weeks. "I'll have excellent doctors and nurses, and your father will visit as often as his duties allow." "We'll visit too," Charlotte declared with fierce determination. "During university breaks, during holidays. We'll make it work." The rest of the day passed in a blur of practical preparations mixed with precious ordinary moments. Kate helped Louis practice a piano piece he was preparing for a school concert. She listened to Charlotte's passionate explanation of her latest environmental project. She sat with George as he worked through questions about constitutional law that had taken on new personal meaning. That evening, as the family gathered for what would be their last dinner together for months, William watched his wife with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak. She was handling this crisis with the same grace she brought to everything else, putting everyone's comfort before her own. "I have something for each of you," Kate announced as they finished dessert. She had prepared 3 small wrapped packages. George opened his to find a vintage compass that had belonged to his great-grandfather. "So, you'll always find your way," Kate explained. Charlotte unwrapped a delicate silver locket containing a pressed flower from her grandmother Diana's garden at Kensington Palace. "To remember that beauty can grow anywhere." Louis discovered a small leather journal with his initials embossed in gold. "For your songs and your thoughts. I want to read them all when I come home." The children had gifts for her, too. George presented a photo album he had secretly compiled, filled with pictures spanning their family's life together. Charlotte had written a letter promising to send weekly updates about her studies and thoughts. Louis had composed a piece of music on his phone, a gentle melody he called "Until You Come Home." As the evening wound down, William and Kate found themselves alone in their sitting room. The fire crackled softly in the grate, and outside, the first autumn rain was beginning to fall against the windows. "Are you frightened?" William asked, voicing the question that had been haunting him for weeks. Kate considered this carefully. "I'm frightened of being away from all of you. I'm frightened of missing moments I can never get back. But I'm not frightened of the treatment itself. I have too much to live for." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the flames dance. Tomorrow would bring a flurry of final preparations, medical consultations, and security arrangements. Tonight was theirs. "Do you remember our first official engagement after we were married?" Kate asked suddenly. William smiled. "Canada. You were terrified about the speech you had to give in French. You told me that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about being afraid and doing what needed to be done anyway. My wise wife, teaching me my own lessons back to me," William said softly. "We faced difficult things before," Kate continued. "The early years when the press was so harsh, when your grandmother died, when your father was ill, we've always found our way through together." "This feels different," William admitted, "because it is different. This time I have to be brave on my own for a while, and you have to be brave here, holding everything together, trusting that I'll come back to you." They made love that night with a tenderness that spoke of gratitude for every moment they had shared and faith in all the moments still to come. Afterwards, they lay awake talking about small things and large ones, storing up conversations to sustain them through the separation ahead. When morning came, it brought with it a clarity that surprised them both. The fear was still there, but it was joined by something else, a quiet certainty that their love was strong enough to weather this storm. The children joined them for breakfast, and this time, the conversation flowed more naturally. They made plans for video calls and visits. They talked about Christmas and whether Kate might be home by then. They carefully avoided discussing the possibility that she might not be. By afternoon, the final preparations were complete. Kate's bags were packed with clothes for a Swiss winter and books to fill the quiet hours. Medical files had been transferred. Security arrangements had been confirmed. The hardest part was saying goodbye to the extended family and staff who had become like family over the years. Her personal assistant wept openly. The head gardener presented her with a cutting from her favorite rose bush to keep in her room. Even the normally reserved palace security team seemed subdued. But through it all, Kate maintained the composure that had made her such an effective member of the royal family. She smiled, she thanked everyone for their support, and she promised to stay in touch. As evening approached, the weight of the approaching separation began to settle over them all like a heavy blanket. Tomorrow, Kate would board a private plane to Switzerland, beginning a journey into uncertainty that would test everything they believed about love, duty, and the strength of family bonds. The Swiss mountain air was crisp and thin as Kate stepped out of the private car that had brought her from Zurich Airport. The clinic nestled against the mountainside like a modern castle, all clean lines and glass windows that reflected the snow-capped peaks surrounding them. Dr. Elizabeth Hoffman, the lead specialist who would oversee her treatment, waited at the entrance with a warm smile that immediately put Kate at ease. "Your Highness, welcome to our facility," Dr. Hoffman said in perfect English, tinged with a slight German accent. "I hope the journey wasn't too difficult." Kate shook the doctor's hand, grateful for the woman's direct, unpretentious manner. "Please, just Catherine is fine here, and thank you for accepting me as a patient." The clinic felt more like a luxury hotel than a medical facility. Kate's suite overlooked a valley filled with evergreen trees and walking paths that wound between them like ribbons. The sitting area had been arranged with fresh flowers and books in English, small touches that showed how much thought had gone into making her comfortable. "We'll begin with a comprehensive assessment tomorrow," Dr. Hoffman explained, as she showed Kate around the treatment areas. "The first week will be primarily diagnostic and planning. Then we'll begin the actual treatment protocol." That first night, alone in her suite, Kate called William. The time difference meant it was late in London, but she knew he would be waiting by the phone. "How is it?" he asked immediately. "Beautiful, actually. Very peaceful. The mountains remind me of Scotland, but sharper somehow. More dramatic." "And the doctors?" "Confident. Thorough. Dr. Hoffman has been doing this longer than anyone else in Europe. I feel like I'm in good hands." They talked for an hour about everything and nothing. William told her about a meeting with Parliament about climate legislation. Kate described the view from her window. Neither of them mentioned how strange it felt to be having this conversation with thousands of miles between them. The first weeks of treatment were demanding, but manageable. Kate's days began early with medical assessments, followed by the treatment sessions themselves. The afternoons were for rest and recovery, though she often felt well enough to walk the mountain paths or read in the clinic's library. She established routines quickly: video calls with the children every Sunday morning, daily phone conversations with William, usually while he had his morning tea and she had her afternoon coffee. She sent pictures of the mountains to Charlotte, who was fascinated by the alpine ecosystem. She listened to recordings of Louis practicing piano. She discussed constitutional history with George, who was writing his thesis on the modern monarchy. Meanwhile, back in London, William was discovering what it meant to carry the full weight of royal responsibilities alone. Kate had always been his partner in every aspect of their public life, from state dinners to charity visits. Her absence created a gap that no amount of rescheduling could completely fill. "You look tired," his father observed during their weekly private meeting. King Charles had called these sessions to provide support and guidance during Kate's absence. "I'm managing," William replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. "When your mother was ill, I made the mistake of trying to do everything myself," Charles said gently. "I thought accepting help somehow meant I wasn't strong enough to protect my family." "What changed your mind?" "Your mother did. She told me that letting people help wasn't a sign of weakness. It was a sign of trust. Trust in the people around us, trust in the institution we serve, and trust in something larger than ourselves." William considered this advice as he prepared for a solo appearance at a children's hospital the next day. It was an engagement Kate had been passionate about, visiting young cancer patients and their families. Going without her felt wrong, but canceling would disappoint children who had been looking forward to the visit for months. At the hospital, William met a 7-year-old girl named Emma who was undergoing treatment similar to Kate's, though her prognosis was less certain. Emma's mother pulled William aside during the visit. "I know the princess is away for treatment," she said quietly. "Emma knows too. She wanted me to tell you that she's praying for the princess every night." William felt his throat tighten. That's very kind of her. She says they're treatment buddies now, even though they're far apart. It gives her courage, knowing someone she admires is being brave too. When William called Kate that evening, he told her about Emma. "She wants to send you a drawing she made of you both as superheroes fighting the bad cells." Kate laughed, the first truly joyful sound William had heard from her in weeks. "I'd love to see that. Maybe I could send her something back?" She'd treasure that forever. These connections between Kate's situation and the people they served began to multiply. Letters arrived at Kensington Palace from families dealing with similar medical challenges. Support groups invited Kate to join their networks. Cancer research charities reported increased donations from people inspired by her courage. Dr. Hoffman noticed the change in Kate's demeanor as these stories reached her. "Your recovery is progressing well," she told Kate during a consultation in her 4th week. "But I think something else is helping too. Purpose, perhaps?" "I never thought about illness as a form of public service before," Kate admitted. "But if my experience can help other people feel less alone in theirs." "Healing happens in community," Dr. Hoffman said. "Even when we're physically isolated, we can be connected to others through shared experience and hope." Back in London, the children were finding their own ways to cope with their mother's absence. George threw himself into his studies with increased intensity, as if academic achievement could somehow speed her recovery. Charlotte began volunteering with an environmental group that worked with cancer survivors, combining her scientific interests with her desire to help people like her mother. Lewis's approach was different. He composed a series of musical pieces inspired by their weekly phone calls, each one capturing a different emotion or conversation. He called the collection Letters to Switzerland and played excerpts for Kate during their video chats. "That one sounds like homesickness," Kate observed after listening to a particularly poignant melody. "It's not homesickness," Louis corrected gently. "It's love at a distance. There's a difference." The media attention that William and Kate had dreaded never materialized in the way they had feared. Rather than invasive speculation, most coverage focused on the outpouring of public support for the family. The British people seemed to understand instinctively that this was a time for privacy and respect rather than intrusion. However, the constitutional questions that had worried them initially proved more complex than expected. Kate's role as the Princess of Wales involved hundreds of patronages and commitments. Some could be postponed, others required different arrangements. "We're managing," William told his private secretary during one of their daily briefings. But it's not sustainable long-term. Perhaps it's not meant to be, came the reply. Perhaps this is teaching us something about how the monarchy might need to evolve. By the 6th week of treatment, Kate was showing significant improvement. The experimental protocol was working better than anyone had dared to hope. Dr. Hoffman was cautiously optimistic about a full recovery. "We're not out of the woods yet," she cautioned during a video call that included William. "But the trends are all positive. If this continues, we might be looking at a shorter stay than originally planned." "How much shorter?" William asked immediately. "Possibly home by Christmas," Dr. Hoffman said. "But we mustn't get ahead of ourselves." That night, Kate stood at her window looking out at the snow-covered mountains. For the first time since arriving, she allowed herself to imagine walking through the doors of Kensington Palace again, hugging her children, sleeping beside William in their own bed. But something had changed during these weeks of separation. She had discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. She had learned to be alone without being lonely, to find peace in uncertainty, to accept help without feeling diminished. More importantly, she had gained a deeper understanding of the thousands of people who faced similar challenges without the advantages of excellent medical care, family support, and financial security. This experience would change how she approached her royal duties, she knew. When she called William that night, their conversation had a different quality than the careful updates they had been exchanging. "I miss you terribly," she said, "but I'm also grateful for this time. Does that sound strange?" "Not strange at all," William replied. "I've been thinking the same thing. I hate that we're apart, but I'm proud of how we're handling it. Both of us. I'm learning things about myself I never would have discovered otherwise," Kate continued. "About what I'm capable of when I have to be." "You've always been the strongest person I know," William said. "Now the whole world gets to see it." As autumn deepened into early winter, both in Switzerland and in London, the separation that had once seemed unbearable began to feel like a different kind of journey they were taking together. Not side by side, but toward each other, each growing stronger in preparation for their reunion. The December morning when Dr. Hoffman delivered the news Kate had been hoping to hear was crisp and bright. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, transforming the Swiss landscape into something that looked like a Christmas card. Kate stood at her window, watching the sun make the snow sparkle like diamonds, when the doctor knocked on her door. "Catherine, please sit down," Dr. Hoffman said, her professional demeanor unable to hide the smile in her eyes. Kate's heart raced. After 3 months of cautious optimism and careful progress reports, she had learned to read the subtle signs in her doctor's expression. "The latest scans show complete response to treatment," Dr. Hoffman announced. "The experimental protocol has exceeded our most optimistic projections. You're going home." Kate felt her knees go weak. 3 months of maintaining hope while preparing for disappointment had trained her not to expect this moment, even when it seemed to be approaching. "When?" she managed to ask. "We'll need a few more days for final testing and preparation, but you could be home by December 20th, just in time for Christmas." Kate closed her eyes and felt tears she had been holding back for months finally spill over. She thought of William's face when she would tell him. She imagined Charlotte's delighted shriek, George's quiet smile of relief, Louis rushing to play her the songs he had been composing. The phone call to London was unlike any they had shared during the long months of separation. When William heard her voice, he knew immediately that something had changed. "I'm coming home," Kate said simply. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Kate wondered if the connection had failed. Then she heard William's shaky breath. "For Christmas?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "For Christmas? For always?" What followed was a conversation filled with laughter and tears, practical questions and impossible plans. They wanted to tell the children immediately, but decided to wait until Kate could video call them all together. They discussed whether to make the homecoming public or private. They planned and replanned how to handle the media attention that would inevitably follow. "I want to do something," Kate said as their conversation began to wind down. "For all the people who wrote to me, who shared their stories, for Emma at the Children's Hospital, for the families who are still fighting." "What did you have in mind?" "I'm not sure yet. But this experience has taught me something about hope and community that I want to share. There has to be a way to use this for something larger than just our family's story." The children's reactions to the video call that evening were everything Kate had imagined and more. Charlotte screamed with joy loud enough that her university dorm mates came running to make sure she was all right. George, now fully the composed young man he was becoming, smiled broadly before admitting that he had been researching Swiss clinics and treatment protocols obsessively. Louis immediately began playing a piece he had composed called Homecoming on his phone. "I have one more song for you," Louis said, suddenly shy, "but I want to play it in person. It's called The Brave Princess, and it's about you." The final days at the clinic passed in a blur of medical clearances, travel arrangements, and goodbyes to the staff who had become like family during Kate's stay. Dr. Hoffman presented her with a small crystal ornament shaped like a mountain peak. "To remember that the most difficult climbs lead to the most beautiful views," the doctor said. Kate had her own gifts prepared. For Dr. Hoffman, a first-edition book about British gardens. For the nursing staff, personalized thank-you notes and photos from the family. For the cleaning woman who had always greeted her with a smile and asked about her children, a silk scarf from London. "Will you stay in touch?" asked Maria, the young nurse who had been Kate's most frequent companion during treatment. "Always," Kate promised. "And I hope you'll visit England someday. I'd love to show you the gardens at Kensington Palace." The journey home felt surreal. Kate had grown accustomed to the quiet rhythm of clinic life, the mountain views, the sense of existing in a protected bubble separate from the demands of royal life. Now she was returning to a world that had continued without her, to responsibilities and expectations that might feel foreign after months away. But as the plane descended toward London, Kate felt only anticipation. The captain had radioed ahead that the weather was clear and cold, perfect flying conditions. Through the small window, she could see the familiar patchwork of English countryside, the Thames winding through London like a silver ribbon. William was waiting at the private airfield, standing beside their car with his hands in his coat pockets and his face turned up toward the sky. Even from a distance, Kate could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept checking his watch. 3 months apart was the longest they had been separated since their honeymoon. When the plane door opened and Kate appeared at the top of the stairs, the December air hit her like a sharp slap of home. The smell was different from Switzerland, less crisp, more complex, carrying hints of city life and sea salt and the particular dampness of English winter. William started walking toward the plane before she had reached the bottom of the stairs. They met halfway across the tarmac, and for a moment, they simply stood looking at each other, memorizing faces that had become familiar only through video screens. "You look," William began, then stopped, seeming to search for words. "Different?" Kate asked, suddenly uncertain. "Beautiful, strong, like you've been on a journey I couldn't follow and now you're back to tell me about it." They embraced then, carefully at first, as if they were afraid the other might disappear. Then with increasing intensity as the reality of being together again sank in. Kate breathed in the familiar scent of William's cologne, felt the solid warmth of his shoulders under her hands. "I missed you," she whispered against his neck. "I missed you too, every single day." The drive back to Kensington Palace took them through parts of London Kate had seen thousands of times, but everything looked fresh and vivid after months away. The Christmas decorations on the streets seemed brighter, the faces of people hurrying along the sidewalks more interesting. Even the gray December sky looked beautiful to her. The children wanted to wait at the palace, William explained as they drove. George insisted on cooking dinner himself. Charlotte has been decorating for 3 days. Louis has been practicing piano for hours. What about the press? We've managed to keep your return quiet for now, but tomorrow there will probably be photographers at the gates. I know. I'm ready for that. They had decided to release a statement thanking the medical team and the public for their support, along with a photo of Kate at home with the family. But tonight would be just for them. The gates of Kensington Palace had never looked more welcoming. As they drove up the familiar driveway, Kate could see warm lights glowing in the windows of their apartment. Someone had hung extra Christmas garlands around the entrance, and there were so many flowers that it looked like a garden in full bloom despite the winter season. The children were waiting in the entrance hall, trying to appear calm but vibrating with excitement. George stepped forward first, ever the responsible eldest child. "Welcome home, Mum," he said, embracing her with careful strength. Charlotte was less restrained, launching herself into Kate's arms with joyful abandon. "You're really here! You're really home!" Louis hung back for a moment, suddenly shy after months of separation. But when Kate held out her arms to him, he melted against her with the trust of a child who has never doubted his mother's love. "I have so much to tell you," Louis said, "and so much music to play for you." "I want to hear it all," Kate assured him. Dinner was a chaotic, joyful affair. George had indeed cooked, preparing Kate's favorite roast chicken with all the accompaniments. The conversation jumped from topic to topic: Charlotte's environmental research, Louis's music projects, George's thesis work, William's solo royal engagements. "It's funny," Charlotte observed as they finished dessert. "We all learned how to be apart, but now we have to remember how to be together again." It was an insightful comment that stayed with Kate as the evening wound down. The experience of separation had changed them all, individually and as a family. They would need time to rediscover their rhythms, to integrate what they had learned during their time apart. After the children went to their rooms, William and Kate sat in their private sitting room, the same room where they had spent their last evening together 3 months earlier. The fire crackled in the grate, and outside, London's lights twinkled in the darkness. "Tell me about the hardest day," Kate said quietly. William thought for a long moment. "It was in October. I was at an engagement at a school, and a little girl asked where you were. When I explained that you were away getting better, she asked if I was sad. And I realized I had been so focused on appearing strong and carrying on with duties that I hadn't let myself feel sad. That night, I called you crying. I remember that call. You said you were tired. I was tired of pretending I wasn't heartbroken that you were so far away." Kate took his hand. "What was your best day?" "Today," William said without hesitation. "But also the day Emma sent that drawing. It helped me understand that your being away wasn't just about us. It was about showing other families that they could be brave too." They talked deep into the night, sharing stories and insights from their months apart. Kate described the other patients she had met, the community of support that had formed among people from different countries facing similar challenges. William told her about the letters that had poured into the palace, the way the public had rallied around their family. "I want to start a foundation," Kate said as they prepared for bed. "For families dealing with serious illness. Not just for medical support, but for emotional support. For helping people stay connected when they have to be apart." "That sounds perfect," William agreed. As they lay in their own bed for the first time in 3 months, Kate felt the profound gratitude of someone who has been given an unexpected second chance. The treatment had saved her life, but the experience had taught her something equally valuable about resilience, community, and the different forms that love could take. "William," she said into the darkness. "Yes?" "I'm home." "Yes, you are." But they both understood that home meant something richer now than it had before. It wasn't just a place or even a group of people. It was the knowledge that love could survive separation, that strength could grow from vulnerability, and that sometimes the most powerful way to help others was simply to show them that difficult journeys could have beautiful endings. The next morning, the story of Kate's return dominated headlines around the world. But the photographs that accompanied the articles showed something the press had not expected: a woman who looked not just recovered, but transformed, stronger, more purposeful, radiating the quiet confidence of someone who had faced their greatest fear and emerged victorious. The official statement released by Kensington Palace was brief but meaningful. "The Princess of Wales has returned home after successful treatment. The family is grateful for the exceptional medical care she received and for the outpouring of support from people around the world. The princess looks forward to resuming her royal duties and to using this experience to support other families facing similar challenges." But the real statement was wordless. In the family photographs taken that Christmas morning, in Kate's serene smile as she appeared at church on Christmas Day, in the way she and William moved together with renewed appreciation for their partnership. Years later, historians would note this period as a turning point for the modern monarchy. Kate's illness and recovery had demonstrated the family's humanity while also showcasing their resilience. The foundation she established became one of the most effective charities in the Commonwealth, helping thousands of families navigate medical crises while staying emotionally connected. But for Kate and William, the lasting impact was more personal. They had learned that love was not just about being together during good times, but about maintaining faith in each other across any distance, through any challenge. Their wordless goodbye at the Swiss clinic had indeed left an enduring imprint on royal history, not as a moment of sorrow, but as the beginning of a deeper understanding of what it truly meant to serve, to love, and to hope.